Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our online meeting. This is a webinar that is aimed at helping parents and caregivers to understand childhood behavior and emotional disorders. You are all welcomed. I believe you are already tuned in on YouTube and you're on Facebook. This program is arranged by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Kempton Park Central. You are all welcome to this webinar. We hope that you will learn one or two things. We are about to talk about issues that relates to children, those who have children. We want to help each other to recognize some signs of emotional or behavioral conditions. That includes your ADHD, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We're going to learn about ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder. There are various behavioral and emotional disorders that children have, and most of the time parents don't know how to recognize signs of these disorders. As a church, we have seen some children who are having some signs of these conditions. In the community, we see children who are experiencing this. So the issue with this is that it's difficult if you are not informed as a parent. It's going to be difficult for you to know what is happening. You may think the child is hyperactive, just think it's normal. You find that there is an underlying problem. So tonight we're going to have that discussion, and please feel free to engage. We've got a guest here that we invited. I will introduce her just now. I just want to open a verse just to begin, and after that we will have a prayer just to open this session. I'll read Proverbs 22 verse 6. It's a common text that we know. Proverbs 22 verse 6, which says, "Train up a child in a way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." This is found in Proverbs 22 verse 6. Train up a child in a way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. We have a duty as parents to look after our children, which are a blessing from God. So in looking after our children, it's important that we train them correctly and we observe how they grow and we take part in their growth in a way that when they are old, they will not depart from it, and in a way of God. So part of training up a child starts with understanding your child and knowing what your child is going through and identify issues that your child has got and make sure that those are addressed because they may impact the growth of your child. So you are in the right platform if you are a parent, and please let's engage. We have a guest amongst us, and is somebody I know very well. She is my colleague. I've worked with her for many years. She is a physiotherapist by profession. Her name is Dr. Natalie Benjamin-Damons. She is a physiotherapist. She specializes in paediatrics and neurological rehabilitation. So I can safely say she is a specialist in the topic, and she works with children. That's what she's specializing in. She's working full-time as a senior lecturer at VETS. She is my colleague at the VETS University in the physiotherapy department. And she's currently also serving as the president of the South African Physiotherapy Association. She's our president currently in this term. So welcome, Dr. Natalie. You are free to take over the presentation, but before we do that, we will just pray and ask God for guidance. Let's take our prayer positions as we begin. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to gather in this fashion. Thank you, Lord, for leading us and for helping us to put together such a presentation or such a discussion. Lord, we thank you for everything that you do for us. As we are beginning the session, we ask that you guide us, be with our presenter, and be with everyone who is listening. Help us, Lord, to learn matters that relate to our children, and help us, Lord, to be able to implement whatever we're learning. At the end of the days, we may be assisted in how we raise our children. Bless us, Lord, with your presence. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. And please ensure that you can share your experience as well as a parent. You don't have to only type questions on the platform, just any experience you want to share with us as a parent, and also questions. We'll entertain those after the presentation. Doc, please take over. We will discuss afterwards.
Thank you very much, Sia, for the lovely introduction and for inviting me to speak this evening. I think it's very important that you mentioned that this is from a physiotherapy perspective, and therefore it is more around information. Please be mindful that what I'm sharing with you this evening is not meant to diagnose any kind of behavioral disorder, but rather to make you aware of what could potentially exist. So I think it's really, really important that you take the time to listen and also help yourself understand that without community support, it becomes very, very difficult. It's also important to understand the world of a child with a behavioral or emotional disorder is very different to the ones that we experience as well. So why does this topic matter? That is what we are going to be delving into a little bit, and I'll be giving you an overview of what it is for the different types of disorders and what we as physios can do to help you in this process, but also an overview of what we'll be covering. So why this topic matters? It's because understanding childhood behavioral and emotional disorders is essential for building not only empathy, but promoting early intervention. And early intervention means as soon as you start feeling unsure of your child's behavior, or you are feeling uncertain about how to respond to, for example, a tantrum, it is time for you to do some intervention. But it also helps to empower you as a parent, as a caregiver, and as your community as well. And with your community understanding, it's easier for them to support you through this process as well. Sorry. So why? Why are we talking about this? Children are still developing. We often forget that they are developing, and on some days they can act really maturely. So we go with that, and we kind of expect a little bit more of them, not knowing or forgetting that they have good days and they have bad days the same way we do. And even as a neurotypical individual, we have difficulty understanding what our bodies are doing and what our hormones are doing, what our brain is doing in the process. And early childhood is a critical period for brain, motor, and emotional development, and the one cannot happen without the other. When we think of disorders like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, autism, and anxiety, they affect how children move, play, and even interact. And I'm sure many of you have heard before of children with repetitive behavior. So they are doing the same thing over and over, which limits how well they explore the environment, and therefore that limits how they develop as well. It also limits their ability to interact with not only yourself as close family, but with others. and therefore the emotional development is also curbed to some degree. As a physiotherapist, we help to identify and support developmental delays that may be linked to emotional or behavioral challenges. And early intervention changes lives. We all know that having a child with any kind of difficulty is challenging, not only for the parents of that child, but for the immediate family and the extended family. And often it limits that family greatly in terms of what they're able to do. By getting early intervention, the family can integrate into the community a lot sooner, and they are equipped with tools to help them deal with potentially difficult situations. Physiotherapy on its own can improve motor skills, reduce frustration, and to support emotional regulation. And families often don't know where to turn. Community awareness helps to really bridge that gap. Physiotherapy is not just about movement. It's about helping children engage with their world, helping them understand where it's safe to move, where it is good to move, when there is a balance between physical aerobic fitness and strength as well. And often our children with ADHD especially, they move a lot more than normal children do. So one would think that exercise is good to tire them out, when in actual fact, if you do the wrong exercise, you could worsen the situation. And that is just one aspect that is very difficult to manage. Movement and your sensory experience, so how you feel the world around you. Are your clothes too tight? Is the material very different? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Does it feel nice against your skin? All those impact how you move. If you think of wearing a pair of comfortable shoes, moving around in your world is much easier than wearing shoes that are too tight or too small. It limits how much you move and how much you move with comfort. But understanding how that sensory component is connected to emotional well-being is equally important. And we as physios work alongside doctors, psychologists, and occupational therapists to provide holistic care. And communities matter. Communities are not just the people in a church. They are the people who live next door. They are the people who assist you in the local store when you go shopping and you have nobody to look after your child who has a disorder. Somebody that in that store can provide you with some support. Stigma related to disorders and misunderstanding often isolates families. And we see this often where one of the first things the families say to you is, we cannot do anything but stay at home because that's where my child is comfortable and that's where we feel safest. It's less tiring. It's extremely exhausting to be out there in the big wild world, and we don't know what to expect and how that's going to impact our child. Educated communities can offer support to families, provide inclusion, and advocate for those families, which is really important. Getting them involved, saying, I understand that your child may be slightly more demanding in what they need, but I can assist by looking after them this Sunday while you go to church and you enjoy the service. If, for example, some children perceive the music as being too loud. Everyone from teachers at the school to the neighbors can help create a safe, nurturing environment, which means that the child can then develop maximally. So what are these behavioral and emotional disorders? You may have heard the word neurodiversity. Neurodiversity, or being neurodivergent is a non-medical term. So it's important that you know it is not being used in the medical world as yet. Psychologists use it quite widely to help understand that my brain is different. And often, when you are looking at these kind of disorders, it's simply that my brain works differently. How I understand my world is different. And it describes people whose brains develop or work differently for some reason. And there's no definite connection between ADHD, for example, and anxiety or a genetic condition. So it's not necessarily that it's in the family. It could be that there is a disconnection in the brain somewhere. Neurodivergent people often have different strength and struggle from compared to people whose brains work more typically. And that typically is also very different to how we understand it and how our world is changing, how we're interacting with our world as well. And we've got to also understand it within that context in terms of if you're from the older generation like myself, where face-to-face interaction is really important. But this kind of interaction across a screen is almost a bit more challenging and less natural, whereas our newer generation finds what we are doing now with this interface as more natural and having face-to-face interactions more demanding on them emotionally. So it's finding that balance and understanding how people respond to that. And it's very important that you have to have it diagnosed by a medical doctor. So we start with autism. So what is autism? It's a developmental condition that affects how a person communicates. So either they don't communicate at all, or they use very simple verbal commands. They do not often do not make any eye contact. So the way we perceive natural communication as in eye contact, you look at my facial expression, you look at how my mouth is moving, that does not occur with them. And as you can understand, children learn language or communication by looking at our faces when they are developing. So I can understand the tone of mommy's voice and her facial expression when she's really angry, it's louder and her face is more serious. But if she's happy, it's more high-pitched, it's calmer, and her face lights up. So that's how we learn to communicate. Because children with autism do not have that eye contact and they find it very difficult, they often have difficulty with communication. And this impacts how they interact socially. So looking at that interaction again in terms of facial expression, am I seeing what is happy, what is sad, what is indifferent, what is me being really angry? And does the tone of voice match with what I am seeing? And often they only hear the tone of voice, but they have no facial expression. You could be just calling loudly to get their attention, but they may perceive it as you being angry. So there is a lot of disconnect in terms of actually understanding what it means to socially interact. The sensory component also comes in when they are touch sensitive. So they do not necessarily like being held, or they select when they want to be held. They therefore are not the kind of person that would come in and give you a hug or respond positively to that kind of expression. They also do not like it if you touch them, or they do not like it to shake hands because it feels really strange to them. That sensory input that we would naturally perceive as a positive influence, they do not perceive it as that. It could be that it provokes anxiety in them, or they could interpret it as being painful. Often Autism is referred to as being a spectrum. So it's being different from one individual to another. And spectrum, when you say spectrum, we often think of it as being a linear one. However, it is more of a round shape. And within that, there are different slices of pies. And one could be social, one could be movement, one could be communication, one could be language. And the extent within how much each of those are influenced is different for each person. And that is why it's called spectrum. So some of the key traits that you would see in a child with autism is that they have this difficulty with social interaction. It could also be that the music is too loud. We know that we love to praise and worship in a church environment, but how is it impacting that child? What we may perceive as being normal or enjoyable, they may perceive as being really painful. So often you would see them holding their ears closed. They've got this visual stimulus of there are many people in the room. There are also lots of people in their space, if you think of the seating in the room, which makes it very, very difficult for them to manage. And it's extremely overwhelming. So all of their senses are being overwhelmed. One thing that has come through quite strongly of late is the sense of smell. So often, everybody loves to wear a lovely fragrance when they're going out. But what impact is that having on that little boy who has sensory issues? So not only is his vision being overstimulated, his hearing is being overstimulated. His sense of space is being overstimulated, as well as his sense of smell. All of those could definitely lead to a meltdown, which then makes it almost impossible for a parent to then deal with that child in that situation. And those are the children that are often labeled as being really naughty when they are in a social environment. And this is often incorrect. It's just that they're unable to manage all of that at once. What happens is their preference for routines. So they love that they wake up at 7 o'clock every morning. Once they wake up, they make their beds, they get dressed. Whatever their routine is, that is really, really important to them. And should anything change, you may not immediately notice a difference in their demeanor, but it does have an impact on how they interact the rest of the day. Bearing in mind that those adjustments for us is easy. However, from an emotional and coping point of view, it is very, very difficult for a child with autism, and they therefore get really, really tired. It's the same with the sensory overload. They become extremely exhausted because they've got so much going on. Lots of them have repetitive behaviors or focused interests. So these are the kids that have difficulty reading, for example, but are brilliant at building a Lego. So without any instruction, they could be doing massive artifacts. So, for example, building a car from scratch without any instruction. These could be your children that are really struggling to verbalize, but can read a book cover to cover within an hour. These are your kids who struggle with simple mathematical concepts, but can solve really difficult ones. And so there are certain skills that they're really good at, and they'll often avoid the ones that they are really struggling with. So in the school environment, the teacher will say, this child is really good at maths, but is not managing any of the other work. They are not looking at the board. They are not copying correctly. It's just too much for them to handle. Then looking at ADHD and understanding that this affects focus, it affects self-control, and it affects activity levels. People with ADHD may be easily distracted, very active, or act without thinking. Again, there are varying degrees of this. So it could be very mild, it could be very moderate, where you see this child is really busy, but they do stop at some point, to very extreme, where they are unable to sit still for even 5 minutes to listen to a story, or to sit still to get dressed, or stand still long enough to brush their teeth, even though it only takes 2 minutes. You'll be talking to them and somebody walks past and their eyes track that individual, or something happens in the background and they've lost total focus of what the conversation was about. It could be somebody that is maybe reading a book and they hear a noise and then they forget where they are in their story. So it varies as well. They could be distracted by sights, sounds, even smells, and they act without thinking, in terms of, we would stop and think, is it a good idea to jump onto that rock? Where would I jump? How high do I need to jump? Am I wearing the right shoes? They don't consider any of that. They just go for it. And they often injure themselves quite often. They'll fall off playground equipment. So these are your kind of children that will end up at the doctor with lots of injuries. And it varies from minor injuries to some severe injuries, and can be very distressing for the parents, because they don't understand what is happening. What's really important to note is that with some of these children, your sleep hygiene, and that's how often you sleep and how the quality of your sleep, so is it really good quality sleep, also impacts ADHD. So the poorer the quality of sleep, the worse the ADHD would be the next day. Medication has an impact, and often kiddies' medication has lots of sugar to make it easier on the tongue. So the child is more likely to take the medication, and therefore has a knock-on effect in terms of ADHD. And it's not just the sugar. Different people respond to different ingredients. So things like energy drinks, we definitely do not advise. There are things like jelly babies, for example. The brighter the color, the more the sugar. It's actually very interesting that the more tartrazine. So one wouldn't think something like cheese curls would be harmful, or knickknacks, but they have a huge amount of tartrazine in. And for some individuals with ADHD, it has a huge impact on how their brain functions and could worsen the ADHD. So the more preservatives there are in what we give our children, the more it could impact the ADHD or the high hyperactivity or the attention deficit. It also speaks to the quality of the food. So it's always a good idea to speak to your dietitian and ask, is what I'm giving my child sufficient? Often we live in a busy work environment, so our hours are very limited. We are less likely to cook a meal from scratch. But that pre-cooked meal that you put in the microwave, you've got to ask yourself how much preservatives are in there to keep it in its state. The same goes for spices. So some of the spices, the spice mixes that we add into our food to make it taste better, does that have an impact on my child's ADHD? Is it something that I need to consider? So having a conversation with the dietitian or the doctor is always a good idea. And then also the amount of activity. So you'll find that these children are really, really busy. And one would think, often you would see some YouTube videos or Instagram clips that says, do these activities. So rough and tumble play before bedtime to tire them out. When in fact, these children are very tired because they're moving all the time during the day. By making them more tired, you are actually stopping the sleep cycle from kicking in when it's meant to. There's also the aspect of screens and blue light, which stimulates the brain. And we can see more and more that with increased screen time, which, by the way, these children often respond to well, and they can sit still for a long time. However, it stimulates their brains in such a way that it keeps your brain going. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that with scrolling or watching videos. Once you sit down and try and relax, you find that your mind is still busy, very busy in the background. And they experience the same thing, but at a higher frequency. And therefore, they're unable to relax enough to settle down and then have good sleep hygiene, like I've mentioned earlier. So some of the key traits that you need to be looking out for is trouble paying attention. So you'd often hear parents say, I have to tell you the same thing over and over and over again. And it's just not sinking in. You know, with most children, by the third or fourth time, they'll stop and say, actually, Mom, you did say that to me, or Dad, you mentioned that before. I hear what you were saying. But these children do not concentrate long enough to follow an instruction. And you'll often see it with a complex instruction. So, for example, go to your room and take off your socks and shoes. They'll go to their room and they'll come back. And then you'll say to them, go to your room, take off your socks and shoes. And they'll go to their room, but they'll come back. So they're only able to comprehend the first part of the instruction. And it happens so frequently that you realize, actually, it's not happening. So what does help is to get down to their level, make eye contact and say, please listen to me carefully. And then give the instruction and start with one simple instruction, which could be take off your shoes. Now take off your socks. Now take these to your room and leave it there, and ask them to repeat the instruction. If they are persistently struggling with these, please write it down and mention it to your doctor when you speak to them about what it is that you are worried about. These kids are extremely impulsive, like I explained earlier. They don't stop to think about the consequences of an action. They'll just go ahead and do it. They have very high energy. These are the ones that the teachers will complain about and say, they are not sitting still, they are not concentrating, they are disrupting the class. I have to put them in timeout, but that doesn't work. Or if I put them outside in timeout, they'll end up playing on the playground equipment and hurt themselves. So understanding that there are times when children are really busy, but if it doesn't settle, after, let's say, 30 minutes, and they continue at that same rate, it's something that you need to be worried about. Then we come to a more sensitive, harder to identify part, and that's anxiety. And this is a constant feeling of worry or fear that can be strong and persistent. In children, it may show up as clinginess, avoidance, or physical symptoms like stomach aches. And it's very difficult to say for a child to express to a parent, I'm anxious, because they do not have the vocabulary. It could be as a result of an incident that happened. You may find that there was a death in the family, and somebody may not have explained what death is to this child, or so caught up in their own grief that they don't understand the impact it's having on the children. And the children start developing this huge fear of losing that parent or losing a loved one, but they cannot explain to you what that is. There's also anxiety associated with new situations, and you see this clearly in children with autism as well. You see it with children with ADHD, and you see them in neurotypical children as well. It's that, okay, it's a new situation, it's new people. I know this person, my cousin has invited me to his birthday party, but who else is going to be there? How many people are going to be there? Will I be able to play with my cousin comfortably? Or will he choose to play with his friends? Anxiety can develop as a result of not having the same bags as everybody else. We know how children are about outer appearances. Anxiety could come about because my best friend no longer wants to play with me but hasn't told me why. It could be that my body is changing and I don't understand what's happening. Nobody's had that conversation with me. It could be because my teacher speaks really loudly and I cannot manage it. It makes me feel anxious. It could be that the teacher is not necessarily singling that child out or screaming all the time. She just has a loud voice. But that makes the child extremely anxious. It could be that there are things happening in the home that's impacting the child as well. And understanding why they're feeling that way is really, really important. And it may manifest in ways where children become extremely clingy, or children who have been independent sleepers suddenly would want to be in your bed more often. Or they'll be in their bed for 5 minutes and say, I'm having bad dreams. And you know very well that they couldn't have had bad dreams because they probably weren't asleep as yet. It could be that they're afraid of the dark. It could be that they're afraid of the sounds when it's really quiet. I had an interesting case of one little girl who fell asleep during every physiotherapy session until one day I asked her, why are you so tired? And she was 11 at the time. And she said to me, ma'am, there's a monster under my bed and it keeps me awake at night. And we had to do some referral to the psychologist to help her understand that. But what did help, and it doesn't always help, is I told her, you know that monsters are really afraid of water. So if you keep a glass of water on your bedside table every night, the monsters won't come anywhere near you. And fortunately for us, in that case, it helped to solve some of the anxiety. But she also had anxiety in terms of not looking like the other children because she was in a wheelchair. There was anxiety around not being able to do or play with her friends the same way that the other children do. So there's a lot that one can identify. So some of the things that you should be looking out for is excessive worry or fear. The child would ask the same questions like, where are you going, mommy? What time will you be back? Are you going to take really long? Who's going to look after me while you're away? Can I call you while you're away? Or if they're able to call you, they'll call you constantly. Mommy, when are you coming home? How long are you going to take? Or if they're at the gate at school waiting for you and you're 2 minutes late, phoning you, mommy, where are you? You're supposed to pick me up. Also, very afraid that something might happen either to you or to them. They have difficulty sleeping, like I explained. So either they go to sleep and they fall asleep, but they wake up during the night, or they have nightmares, or they wake up really tired because they've been up and then falling asleep or feeling anxious, or they start crying. And often our instinct as parents is to say, you're naughty, you should be sleeping, without actually engaging actively with them to say, what is making it difficult for you to sleep and how can I help? Do you need an extra blanket? Or shall we talk about what is happening to you? What good thing happened today? What bad thing happened to you today? What will you do next time to do something differently? How will you manage it differently? Just asking those questions will invoke quite interesting responses from them in terms of understanding how their world works. And anxiety could be simply that, Mommy, I am not running as fast as the other kids. And then explaining to them that it may not be their strength, but they could very well be a long distance runner, and try and problem solve that way. They avoid certain situations. And often what we don't talk about is abuse or people that our children are not comfortable with. If that happens, we've got to make sure that we listen to that red flag and say, explain to me what is going on. Why do you not want to go to that house? Why do you not want to interact with this person? What is happening at school? Are your friends being nasty to you? So really trying to have a conversation around where the anxiety is coming from. And then what role do physios play? We try to help with motor development and obviously some of the emotional regulation, helping them understand how your emotions impact your ability to move. If I'm feeling very anxious, I am not going to explore the playground in the same way that another child would be doing, that is, has slept well, had a good meal, and is feeling really happy and excited. If I'm feeling really anxious about being in this strange environment, I'm not going to move, I'm not going to explore. Understanding sensory integration and movement. So why is it important that I listen to my child when they say, that jersey makes me feel scratchy or itchy, I really don't like it? For some children with autism, for example, it could be that they don't like the colors. So you may see that they'll choose calmer colors. So your blue hues, they'll tend to want to have greens or grays rather than the bright colors because it's just too much sensory information. And understanding that how they perceive their environment from that perspective has a huge impact on how they move. And then working with the parents to say, look, hot water doesn't work for bath time, try it a little bit cooler, or cool water doesn't work, try it a little bit warmer. Get the child to actually tell you this is just right. It kind of reminds you of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where Papa Bear's porridge was too hot, Mama Bear's was too cold, and Baby Bear's was just right. And the Baby Bear's or Papa Bear's chair was too hard, Mama's was too soft, and Baby Bear's was too just right. And then the same with the beds. It was too hard, too soft, and just right. And we all know that if something, for example, like a bed, is too hard or too soft, we really have difficulty settling in it. But if it's just right, we have no trouble sleeping. And this is helping us understand that this is exactly how our children are experiencing their world. It's that it's either too hard, too soft, but there is a just right for me and how I need it to be able to fall asleep quite well in order to rest enough, in order to sit still long enough. So even considering things like, is the chair the right height? Is the chair in the right space in the classroom? So we then speak to the occupational therapists and help to see how can we make this space better. We find that some teachers love rotating the children in the classroom, and for some children, it's just too much. If they find a spot that's just perfect, that's the spot they're going to sit in. And that's the spot where they feel comfortable, the spot where they can focus better. It may be but that the door or the window is behind them, teachers in front of them, and they can focus. It could be that teacher wears a lot of jewelry and it makes a noise when she moves her hands and explains. And just that noise makes it so hard for me to focus. And then understanding that environment and how that plays a role in how the child develops as well, and how the child interacts in the classroom. As a mom, is my perfume affecting my child's ability to come into my space to give me a hug? Is the bright colors on my nails distracting them? Is the jewelry I'm wearing too much for them? Is the fur coat that I'm wearing really almost off-putting for them? They really struggle with that. And how do they perceive their environment? And it's very hard to explain to somebody that actually I'm having difficulty looking at you because the t-shirt that you're wearing is too bright. My eyes cannot handle the bright yellow color, especially in the sun. And this is affecting my ability to actually look at you and interact with you. Children don't understand that. But if we ask the questions like, is this okay? What's making you feel uncomfortable? And giving the children the safe space to say, this is what's bothering me, often helps a lot. As physios, we also do assessments. So we look at their gross motor function. And it's not that we want to look at what's wrong, we want to understand how they move. And understanding how they move is one aspect. Understanding why they move the way they move is the other aspect. Is it because they don't like how the carpet feels under their bare feet? Is your child somebody who never walks barefoot outside? Or is your child somebody that only walks barefoot wherever they go because that's where they're comfortable? Are there certain shoes that they're wearing, other shoes they don't wear at all? It's almost easier with our children with autism because they say it right up front. They'll avoid it completely, or they'll almost throw a tantrum and say, no, this is not what I want. If you think of the 2-year-old who will throw a tantrum if they don't want to get dressed, and you kind of think, okay, this child is just being naughty. There is that developmental phase to it, but there is an element of actually, is there something sensory going on that we need to investigate? And it's important for parents to make notes of these. It's always that pair of shoes that's a problem. It's always this jersey that's a problem. It's always this vest that's a problem. It's this color that's a problem. If I wear bright yellow, my child has really tends to avoid me a lot. If they didn't sleep well, or if we've had McDonald's for supper last night, is this what is affecting my child? And I say McDonald's because the tomato sauce has lots of tartrazine in it as well. And what we also do is we give lots of parent education and home programs. And home programs is not you're going to do this set of exercise so many times a day. It's encouraging different types of play. So looking at your child with ADHD, looking at calming activities. So we'll encourage yoga and maybe a little bit of Pilates if we think that the child needs to be strengthened. Or if your child is autistic, to actually tailor the exercises to how they're able to move and where they're able to move, and then promote some sort of integration through that as well. Here are some lovely resources. The Neurodiversity Center is a center that has all the professionals, and they can do referrals within the center for you, in terms of starting with occupational therapy, going to the doctor, going to the psychologist, etc. They also have some lovely resources, if you go to their website, to help you manage children with autism specifically. Then there's autism resources, and then Indigo Learning. So Indigo Learning is more of a learning platform that helps you find resources for children with neurodiversity, and who learn differently, and how to actually manage that a little bit better. So how can communities help? Is by reducing stigma and supporting families, helping instead of judging and saying, oh, that family hasn't been to church in months. Stop and ask, but why? What are the challenges they are experiencing, and how can we help them? If the church hall is too noisy, do we need a separate room? Some churches have cry rooms, but that's difficult for a child with autism because they are babies that may be crying and may be difficult, and there are toddlers running around. Is there a need for a separate room where it's quiet, the light is not as bright, the carpet is not as hard, for these children to actually just be and have an opportunity to listen to what is happening. Do you turn down the speakers in the room when praise and worship is happening, but play it for them at a softer volume? Do you play different praise and worship for them, which has a softer tone? But also encouraging these families to seek help early. So if there are any of these signs that you're really, really worried about, write down those points and make sure that when you go to your GP next, discuss these issues and ask, do you advise that I go to an OT? Do you advise that I go to a physio? You can go to your OT first, or you can go to a physio if you are familiar with one and say, this is what I'm seeing. Can you help me understand what is happening here? Can you help me find ways to cope with it better? And then I've got here a nice slide with some resources in terms of how can you cope better? So the area of support. Often children with autism struggle to move from one activity to another, and they struggle to shift that focus. So what can we do? We can use visual schedules. So we can say to them, it's now 2 minutes. You've got to wind down this activity. Or if you start playing a song in the background, then they know that this activity is now coming to an end and I need to transition into the next one. So for example, going from watching TV to start turning the volume down, going softer and softer, or getting them a timer so that they can see the time is running down. When it gets to 30 seconds, I've got to actually switch the TV off, even if it means that I sit here for a little bit and just wind down enough so that I am ready for bath time or ready to go and brush my teeth. And that reduces anxiety massively. I know for many of us it's really hard, but to have a routine that you stick to that is similar from one day to the next helps a great deal in terms of settling children. One, in terms of making sure that they are eating at the right time and making sure that they are going to bed at the same time every day and that they wake up naturally at the same time every day. When you see that a child is really struggling with overstimulation, we provide things like quiet sounds, like I explained earlier on. Is there a room where the mom or the dad and the little one can just spend some time to sit and be quiet? And it needs to be an actual room. The car is not ideal because it's very crowded. It feels cramped. In summer it will be hot, in winter it will be cold. And that change in temperature is also impactful. It does make it really, really difficult. Getting them headphones to wear if they are sitting in the main church hall during praise and worship, and helping people understand that that is not because they're listening to anybody else or anything else. It's simply to cancel out the noise, to make it easier for them to focus. It could help in the classroom environment as well. If the child is really struggling with the noise levels, to actually put that on. If the child is really struggling with the teacher's high tone or loud voice, having those on dampens her voice and makes it easier for them to actually listen to the voice as well. And then emotional regulation. Understanding mood swings to some degree is normal, and but it can become excessive. And as a mom myself, having to experience a tantrum is extremely exhausting, especially if you have other kids to worry about. And I've often been criticized for this, but if one of my boys throw a tantrum, I'll stand dead still where I am in the shop or wherever it is. I'll let them do their tantrum, finish it. Once they settle, only then do I ask, are you okay? Can we carry on? And we could end up sitting there for half an hour, 45 minutes, just waiting for that individual's nervous system to calm down enough to interact and say, actually, I'm too tired to be here. Can we go home? And thankfully, we do have services that offers delivery, same-day delivery for groceries, etc. Use that to your advantage. If it's too much, if you know that it's been a really busy day, there's nothing wrong with ordering from Checkers 6060 and getting what you need to avoid having to go to the store, dealing with the bright lights, dealing with the noise, dealing with the rushing in there because you need to get home to cook, etc. Use simple things like that to help understand, how can I make my life better? How can I make the life of my child a little bit better? And how do we interact with each other that is meaningful and is calmer? And it means that my child develops to the best of their ability. So I will share my PowerPoint after. So the key messages is just that you've got to look for these warning signs. If it's repetitive, if it's not going away, please write them down. So keep a diary of what you're experiencing. I know that it can be extremely exhausting as a mom to still think about writing everything down, but it's so important as it gives good insight for the healthcare professional assisting you in terms of exactly what it is that you are helping with. It also makes diagnosis a lot easier and faster. Please seek help as soon as possible. Having a child with neurodiversity is extremely tiring, and it's very taxing on the extended family. So the sooner you get help, the sooner your support system can help you, and the sooner you can put structures in place to help your child develop the best way they can. And physiotherapy as a whole is a huge part of what we do. However, education is a bigger part, and empowering parents is more important in terms of helping you cope in your home, in your community, and wherever it is that you need to be interacting as a holistic family. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natalie, for that informative talk. You were very comprehensive in your discussion. I think you gave us a lot to reflect on, to think about as parents. I see there's more people who have joined us. Thank you so much for joining. I believe you found this presentation informative. Please indicate if you have questions. Just type your questions on the chat. We can entertain those. While you are doing that, I have some questions just to follow up on what Doc has just discussed. Doc, you in your presentation you touched a bit on autism, ADHD, and also anxiety. What are some of the learning disorders or disorders and intellectual disabilities that we pick up in children?
So
Learning
from
disorders and intellectual disabilities.
Yeah, so it really varies. So cognitive impairment is, things like difficulty understanding spoken language or expressing yourself appropriately. It's difficulty in understanding your environment and interpreting what is happening in terms of is this hostile environment? Is it a safe environment? What is actually happening? In terms of learning, dyslexia is one that lots of us are familiar with in terms of the letters don't look right, or it takes me a lot longer to read through this and understand what it is that I'm reading. We have dyscalculia, which is the difficult to understand numbers and how addition is different to subtraction, is different to multiplication and division. So those individuals really have difficulty with those calculus, also understanding numbers and what they mean. There is dysgraphia, so you can see and identify a word, but you're unable to write it down in the same way. So it's slightly different to dyslexia. It's you can actually see the word in the right way, but when you have to write it down, the sensory component of that is really, really difficult. And that is dealt with more by your occupational therapists as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that. So it's not just a physiotherapist that deals with
No.
such disorders. So it's a team of rehab specialists, like you've mentioned, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, doctors do get involved as well. So it's a whole team that looks after these children. And then at what point do you really start getting worried? Because I mean, children are growing, they don't know much. So as you are teaching, they will struggle to understand certain concepts. At what point do you start worrying about a child and think they have a problem? One friend of mine, a colleague of mine, was saying, he moved his children from government school to private. The more he takes them to more expensive schools, they start picking up things with their child. And then he says, these private schools, they always want to find something wrong with your child. Children are children, they are growing, they just need to teach. So obviously, he was frustrated. I experienced that as well, to say the more you take them to these advanced schools, the more they pick up things with your children, and somehow you are tempted to think, "Ish, these people, they just want money." At what point do you really start to worry when you have a child?
So it's usually if the problem is persistent. Good practice is always to get a second opinion. And yes, the notion is true that, with some schools, the more expensive they are, the more likely they are to refer to their specialized services. But what would be advised is to then make sure that you speak to a professional outside of that group. So somebody that's not related to that environment at all. So a therapist, for example, that doesn't work in a private school, but maybe works in a government school and gets you have the option of having your child assessed by the Department of Education instead, to see what the issue is. The key thing is that if the issues are persistent, if it's not going away, if the second opinion is revealing the same thing, occupational therapists, psychologists, physios, and doctors do standardized tests, and we do exercise caution with them. But the tests do help us identify the areas where there is more difficulties and the areas that would need intervention. And if those scores are persistent, then you know that you have an issue. And it's always important then to see a doctor for a proper diagnosis. There are diagnostic tests specifically for autism, and the doctors, the neurodevelopmental doctors do that, or the pediatric neurologists, and it's the same for ADHD. It's very specific traits. It happens the same way every single time.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that. I think it's very helpful. Tell me the services that are provided in schools. Do we have free services, especially in the public schools, or you will always have to pay a lot of money? Because you can pay up to 20,000 for these assessments. Are there free services that government is providing?
So there are, like I said, if it's educational related, you could approach the Department of Education to assist with an assessment. The only problem with government services is that the waiting period is quite long. Like I said, if you could get a professional outside of that area. So, for example, if the school is in Sandton, try and get a professional that is based either in Kempton or in Benoni, which is far-fetched. So they're not in the same income bracket, basically. And that's the way to find almost more affordable services. You do have practices that do pro bono assessments. The hospitals also do free assessments. But you've got, like I said, you've got to come with that information and say, these are the things I'm really worried about. This is the reason why I'm asking to see a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, for example. What you can also do is you can ask your occupational therapist or your speech therapist or your physio to write a referral to a doctor and say, please assess this child. That route is usually faster.
Okay. No, thank you so much for that. Just going back to the issue of parenting, I mean, we use different methods of parenting and we discipline our children in it differently. So, how do we as parents adjust our way of disciplining our kids, especially when you think you have a child that has got a special disorder?
So you've got to look at the body language. We often, as parents, if you were raised in a specific era, we know that we've got beating the child is not a problem, even though some would consider it abuse. How they respond to you is really key. Are they withdrawing completely? Or are they actually engaging with you? Because that's what children are meant to be doing. As young children, we were told, you don't talk back to me. One of the key things that you can do is to actually engage with them and to ask them, so how are you understanding this? Explain to me what it is that you're feeling. Can you give me a word of what it is that you're feeling? And we use simple words. Are you feeling afraid? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling hungry? Are you feeling that you need some time to yourself? Using words is much easier, and using conversation starters. So before you actually react, is to stop and understand the situation, which is something we have great difficulty with because we're tired. We want to get things done as well. So if you could just stop, assess the situation, and then see from their perspective first, what is it that had occurred, how they managed it, and what you were seeing in the situation. So, for example, if two of my boys fight, often one will say, "Mommy, this is doing this. This one is doing that to me," and it can become explosive. And my natural instinct is to scream and stop that. You shouldn't be doing that to one another. And I've learned now to take a step back and say, "Tell me what happened."
Sure,
And
sure.
they often will pause to think about what actually happened, and you ask them to talk you through what they've experienced as well.
Sure.
It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. Yeah. There's a question I think on the screen there from Facebook platform to say how about the kids that can't read but can learn orally and they write from right to left. I don't know, maybe what condition would that be, and then how can these kids be assisted?
It's difficult to say what the condition could be because you need to have a more holistic view of what the child is doing. Is it just the writing? Is there a visual issue? Do they have to have their eyes tested? So it's actually something that would need to be assessed by a psychologist specifically
Okay.
with specific tests, because it could just be that, like I explained earlier, on what I'm seeing and understanding is not necessarily what I can write down. Is there also a component of I don't have the strength to hold a pen? I'm not understanding how to translate what I'm seeing visually into something written as well. So this is definitely something that a psychologist should be assessing.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Another one says, how can we support a grown-up man who has autism? I think this one is something that I noted as well to say, can we have adults with autism? How do we support a grown-up man with autism? Is he highly sensitive, or he is highly sensitive to sounds, like when a person does cough or clear the throat?
So earphones. Thankfully, they are still quite fashionable at this stage, but noise cancelling earphones are really, really good. But it's got to be the soft ones that covers the whole ear, right? You get the ones that are also quite padded on the top of the head so that it doesn't irritate them. And having that over the years helps a great deal. And it, like I said, it dampens down the sound enough
Sure.
for them to be able to manage a normal situation. Often this actually startles them rather than he's being sensitive. So it gives them a big fright, and it gives an anxious response. So they become anxious as a result of that. So also teaching them how to breathe through that is really
Sure.
important. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this question is very important because in the home setting, which means there must be a way we do things to accommodate this person, even at church level. I
Yes.
know some families who are not able to bring their children to church, or they have adults who are not able to come to church because of this problem. The question would be how can you touch about how we can adjust our church setting and our homes, but I'm just thinking in a situation where there's singing in the church and we are all together. Does it mean that these children or these people need a separate program for them? If they do need such a program, are we not excluding them? How best can we, accommodate them? Does it mean we must adjust our way of doing if there's one or two people in the church? Because we don't want to see somebody not able to come to church, mingle with people because of this special problem.
Yes. So it's not a matter of isolating them. You could have a room in the back of the church that has glass, so they can see what's happening inside. But whoever, it's the two-way, it's like a mirror glass. You can't see
Yeah,
in, but they can see out.
sure.
And that has a noise dampening wall, so it's less noisy in there, especially if they are sensitive to people in their space. So you children with autism specifically, they get very anxious when there are lots of people in their space. And we get enthusiastic when we do praise and worship because we sing, we dance, we move around in the room, and they would find that overwhelming.
Yeah.
Having that space, you are still part of what is happening.
Mm,
What happens is you would have a speaker in the room which is connected to the podium, and you can turn the volume up or down in the room depending on
mm,
what the person can tolerate.
mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's a colleague of mine also who told me about a project in their church where they had a separate room which is well equipped to cater for children with special needs. So, which means there is a way to deal with this. We just need to think outside the box and accommodate these children as much as possible. But the important thing is to first identify these problems and get them diagnosed, as you've mentioned,
Yeah.
and then we come up with solutions.
Yeah.
Now, earlier, oh yeah, you want to come in?
Yeah, but also educating everybody, to help them understand that it's not a question of isolation. It's a question of creating a safe space for somebody who has different needs. We don't say special needs; we say different needs.
Yes.
And understanding that somebody is sitting in the church hall with earphones on because they're sensitive. You'll find that in some situations there are people with dark glasses and these earphones on in the church, but it's purely because it limits the visual input and it limits the auditory input, which is a
Sure,
temporary solution as well.
sure, sure. Thank you so much. I don't see other questions. Maybe just as we conclude, there is one thing you mentioned about the use of technology, the screens, and all of that. How does that really make situation worse? How wise can we be in using? Because I know children today, you can't take their phones away from them. Some, especially some of those who have special needs, and they have gotten used to devices. How impactful are these things in their lives?
Yeah, it has a major impact because technology has advanced to such a degree that our screens don't give us as severe headaches anymore. If you think of
Mm,
the old screens, that if you stared at it for too long, your eyes just wasn't doing it anymore. It doesn't happen like that. And it emits blue light. And that blue light stimulates the brain all the time. So your melatonin, which is the hormone that helps you sleep, is not released sufficiently, or sufficient amounts thereof is not released, which is why, it's soft lights to actually, as you're limiting their screen time. So let's say, for example, they've been on there for an hour. At the halfway mark, at the 30-minute mark, you dim the screen completely. And that also limits the amount of emissions, but then to also turn down the sound. So you're actually kind of tapering it away. The psychiatrist had a lovely talk on, I think it's one of the morning shows on SABC, about screen time and the importance of actually weaning, not so going from having this massive amounts of time on the screen to gradually lessening it to actually only an hour a day, which is what is the maximum amount recommended for children. And then replacing that with activities such as reading, or listening to an audio book, or doing some physical exercise instead of being in front of the screen as well.
Sure. Thank you, Natalie. I think, maybe we may need to come back and really unpack some of the issues, because as you mentioned, there are so many of these things we can talk about. But today, I think it was more of an awareness and to challenge us as parents to say it is important that we spend time with our children, notice these behavioral, emotional, and intellectual problems that they experience, and seek help as early as possible. There is another question coming. Can we have a platform where we teach neurotypical children to accept children with different needs, so that they do not tease, laugh, and exclude others? It's an important question. Do you want to?
Yes, I think this kind of talks is really important. The Department of Education does have a series of books of children that are different. I don't think it's being taught in all of our schools. And I do think, engaging with the schools, with the local schools, and saying, can we do a talk with your children on why are children different? As a mom, it's important for me also to educate my children about why somebody on crutches, why somebody in a wheelchair, why is a child behaving differently, because they do ask questions. I think it starts with us as parents to educate ourselves so that we can educate our children, and to also be brave enough to say to the other parents, please educate your children about what this is about. To be brave enough to say to the school teacher, please educate the rest of the children about why my child is different, and to stop the bullying, because these are our children that are very prone to be bullied. And it's a huge problem that cannot necessarily be addressed straight away or directly. So I do think there's a huge role in terms of education that we need to do around what it means to be different.
Sure. Yeah, no, bullying is an issue in schools, and many kids do kill themselves because of bullying. So it is something that is very important. If you're working with children, especially church setting, children must be educated about, especially if we know there are kids that are really would be oversensitive to certain things, laughing at each other. Those things should be addressed in every platform. Yeah, thank you so much. Another one, do these conditions like autism, ADHD worsen with age? Yeah. Do they worsen with age?
No, they don't. So it's difficult to explain. It's rather your environment that would influence how bad the symptoms are. So like I explained to you, if a child with autism is in an environment that is overstimulating all the time, their autism, it really gets the better of them. The same with a child with ADHD. Like I said, if you're giving them too many sweets, colored drinks, energy drinks, cake, whatever, and they're playing outside, the longer they're exposed to that, the worse the ADHD becomes, the poorer the quality of sleep. If a child is having difficulty sleeping, it would seem that the ADHD or the autism is worse, but it's actually just because they didn't have enough sleep. It's the same with us. If we didn't have a good night's sleep, how we manage to cope with our activities during the day varies. So it's that variation. And of course, if there's any stressful or traumatic event, it would appear that the autism or the ADHD is worse. But it's actually that emotional component of it that has been worse or is being challenged more than usual.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. I believe we've come to the end. I think I don't have any other questions. But yeah, thank you so much, Doc, for that informative discussion. Parents and leaders, I think this presentation did not just challenge parents, also the leaders in the church, how we conduct services. We must be sensitive to issues like this that we've just discussed. I think we are going to close with a prayer, as we have started with a prayer. Let's take our prayer positions as we conclude with a prayer. Our Father, God, thank you so much for your presence in this discussion. Thank you for guiding us as parents. The session was very informative. We learned a lot about issues that children are facing. We ask that, Lord, you intervene in our situations. There are parents here who are really having these children who are challenged. Other parents may not know that they have this problem. Help us, Lord, empower us. Help us, Lord, to be able to be close to our children and identify these problems. And tonight we are told there is a solution to these things. Help us, Lord, to know where to go and how to deal with such issues and support our kids and adjust our environments, even at church level, to accommodate as much as possible. Dear Father, help us, give us wisdom to raise these kids in the way they should go as we prepare them for heaven one day. Bless our presenter and her family. Bless everyone who attended tonight. I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Sia, and thank you for having me.
Sometimes I fall to my knees and pray. Come, Jesus, come. Let today be the day. Sometimes I feel like I'm gonna break, but I'm holding on to a hope that won't fade. And come, Jesus, come. We've been waiting so long for the day you return to heal every hurt and right every wrong. We need you right now. Come and turn this around. Deep down I know this world isn't home. Come, Jesus, come. Come, Jesus, come. There'll be no Jesus comes. Let today be the day. You come for the weak and the strong just the same, and all will believe in the power of his name. Come, Jesus, come. We've been waiting so long for the day you return to heal every hurt and right every wrong. We need you right there. Come and turn this around. Deep down I know this world isn't home. Come, Jesus, come. Come, Jesus, come. One day he'll come and you'll stand face to face. Come and lay it all down, 'cause it might be today. The time is right now. There's no need to wait, no. Your past will be washed, but rivers of grace, oh, come, Jesus, come. We've been waiting so long for the day you return to heal every hurt and right every wrong. We need you right there. Come and turn this around. Deep down I know this world isn't home. Come, Jesus, come. Come, Jesus, come, yeah. Come, Jesus, come. Come, Jesus, come.